Welcome to the deep dive. We take the sources, the noise, everything, and boil it down for you.
That's the plan.
And today, we've got something pretty interesting. An op-ed from the Wall Street Journal written by former Vice President Mike Pence.
Yeah, the guy who was right there second in command for 4 years.
Exactly. And now he's writing publicly about his concerns about the direction the country's taking under his former running mate.
It's definitely a situation. There's an obvious tension there, maybe even, a bit of irony.
You could say that. He was part of the administration he seems to be critiquing now, or at least distancing himself from.
He does start by acknowledging the president's unrivaled political comeback. Gives him that.
But then pivots pretty fast.
Right. Straight into sounding the alarm about what he calls a deviation from traditional conservative values.
So our job today, really, is to dig into that, unpack this critique, look at his own record, and sort of figure out what's actually going on here.
Let's do it. Where do you want to start? The
Mm.
values thing.
Yeah, let's start there. This idea of abandoning traditional conservative values. It's central to his piece.
Okay.
But, you immediately think, okay, where were these values consistently applied during the last 4 years? When he was VP.
Right. You look back, things like the family separations at the border, that caused a massive outcry.
Huge. And, the administration sort of cozying up to dictators, praising authoritarian leaders. How does that square with traditional conservative foreign policy?
It's a fair question. And then, of course, there's January 6th.
Can't ignore that. An attack on the Capitol itself. It's hard to reconcile those events with a strict adherence to, well, any kind of traditional conservative principles.
It really is. So when Pence talks about these values now, you kind of want specifics, don't you?
Yeah.
Which policies then embodied them and what specific shifts is he lamenting now?
It's not always clear from the op-ed.
No.
Oh.
And what's interesting, too, is he does praise some current things, like the renewed focus on immigration control and bumping up military spending.
Yeah, he gives credit there, but that's where it gets complicated.
Right here, too.
Well, both of those things cost a lot of money. A tougher immigration stance, more enforcement, more military hardware. It all adds up.
Okay, yeah. Significant costs.
So he praises those, which fit a certain conservative mold, sure. But then he turns around and voices these major economic concerns.
So there's a contradiction.
Mhm.
Championing expensive policies while also worrying about the economy.
Seems like it. How do you square big spending with, fiscal responsibility, another supposed conservative cornerstone?
Good point.
Right.
Which brings us neatly to his economic critique.
Right. He calls the economic results undeniably mixed.
And mentions flashing economic warning signs. He even says the first quarter was the second worst economic start since Nixon.
That's quite an indictment, especially since, the economic policies of the administration he's served in directly led into this period.
Absolutely. And he zeroes in on one specific policy from that time.
The tariffs.
Bingo. The sweeping tariffs imposed on friend and foe alike. He explicitly calls them a massive policy misstep.
Which is remarkable considering he was vice president when they were rolled out. He's basically criticizing his own administration's policy.
And he acknowledges the damage. He says, the only thing America has been liberated from is trillions of dollars in investments because of those tariffs.
Wow. That's quite a statement.
It is. Now, economists debate the exact impact. It's complex stuff, but there's definitely evidence they hurt American businesses, manufacturers.
And consumers, you and me, we paid higher prices.
Exactly. Increased costs, retaliation from other countries.
Yeah.
It wasn't the smooth sailing that was promised.
No, the promise was jobs, wealth, maybe even, remember this, eliminating income tax through tariffs.
Which always sounded, let's just say, economically optimistic.
Or dubious. The reality seems to be higher prices and economic uncertainty, which Pence himself now seems to be conceding.
He even sort of flags a potential downturn later this year as the tariffs bed in. That's his phrase.
Bed in. Sounds gentle, but could mean real economic pain.
Could. So what's his solution? He advocates for, quote, free trade with free nations.
With an exception for China, he notes.
Right. And he also wants to extend the tax cuts from the previous administration, the ones he helped pass.
Okay, let's unpack those solutions. Free trade with free nations sounds good on paper, but we know past free trade deals have sometimes cost American jobs in certain sectors, right?
Yeah.
It's not always a clear win for everyone domestically.
That's true. There are always winners and losers.
And extending the tax cuts, the ones from 2017, those largely benefited corporations and the wealthy.
They did, disproportionately.
So extending them could mean, well, more national debt, potentially worse income inequality, which again raises questions about long-term fiscal conservatism.
It definitely complicates the traditional conservative values argument he's trying to make.
Okay, let's shift gears. Foreign policy. He does give the current White House some credit here.
A little bit, yeah, for reasserting American leadership in the Middle East, tackling the Houthi issue.
But it's selective praise, because he immediately pivots to criticizing talks with Iran.
Right. Slams the idea of direct talks on their nuclear program, compares it to Obama's failed nuclear deal, the JCPOA.
Okay, but hold on. The JCPOA, multiple world powers backed it. The whole point was to prevent Iran getting a bomb.
And by most accounts, it was working. International inspectors confirmed Iran was complying.
Until the administration Pence was part of just pulled out unilaterally.
Which arguably led directly to the mess we're in now, with Iran accelerating its program.
Exactly. So it's a bit rich to criticize diplomacy now after scuttling the previous diplomatic success.
And his demand now. Iran's program must be verifiably dismantled or destroyed.
Which everyone wants, sure. But if you dismiss diplomacy like the JCPOA, what's left? How do you achieve that without, military action?
Which carries enormous risks. He doesn't really spell that out.
No. What about Russia and Ukraine?
There, he does acknowledge that the current president's wavering support for Ukraine has emboldened Russia.
That's a significant admission.
And he says Putin doesn't want peace. He wants Ukraine. Which seems accurate.
So what's his solution there?
He calls for renewed American military support for Ukraine.
Which sounds good, but again, context matters. The previous administration, his administration, often seemed lukewarm on NATO, questioned support for Ukraine.
There was definitely inconsistency. So it raises the question, how reliable is this call for renewed support, really? Depends who's in charge, doesn't it?
It seems to, which leads us inevitably to January 6th.
The elephant in the room, as he said.
Pence played a crucial constitutional role that day, certifying the election results.
Despite immense pressure not to. Pressure from the top.
Which put him directly at odds with the effort to overturn the election, and led to, well, rioters chanting his name, calling for him to be hanged. Right there in the Capitol.
It was an incredibly dangerous moment, a direct attack on democratic process and on him personally.
And now, the man he served under, the current president, have actually pardoned some people involved in that insurrection.
Which just adds another layer of complexity, surrealness to Pence's entire position now.
It really underscores the fractures, the deep disagreements about what even happened that day and what it meant.
Absolutely. So after laying out all these criticisms, the tariffs, the foreign policy missteps, the departure from values, it's jarring to read him also say
what?
That the current president deserves credit for an energetic and effective start, and that his instincts on security and sovereignty are as sharp as ever.
Wait, really? After everything else, that feels contradictory, almost schizophrenic.
It does seem like a real tightrope walk.
No,
Maybe
right.
trying to criticize the policies without fully alienating the base that, still largely supports the current president.
Perhaps. And then there's his warning against swapping time-tested conservative principles for populist platitudes.
Which is fascinating, isn't it?
Huge.
Considering the undeniably populist nature of the movement he was a central part of for 4 years.
It makes you ask, what exactly are these time-tested principles he means, and how did they fit into the administration he served? It's just murky.
Very murky. And his final advice, it sounds like standard fare.
Yeah. Stand with allies, stand up to enemies, cut taxes and tariffs, lead on the world stage.
It's a list of slogans almost.
But given the contradictions and the lack of specifics on how to achieve these, especially given the challenges he himself outlined, it feels, well, a bit hollow, doesn't it?
It does lack concrete plans, especially considering the inconsistencies we've talked through.
So looking at the whole op-ed, what's a final assessment?
Well, it's hard not to see it as maybe a somewhat desperate move.
Yeah.
A figure whose political star has definitely faded, trying to regain some relevance.
He's trying to carve out a space for himself.
Exactly. By critiquing the current administration, he's trying to differentiate himself. But it's tough because his own record is so intertwined with it. The contradictions keep tripping him up.
Yeah, it feels like someone politically weakened, trying to find a foothold. And the critique, while hitting some potentially valid points about policy,
It ultimately kind of fails, doesn't it? Fails to grapple with the deeper nature of the political movement he was part of. It doesn't offer a clear, consistent alternative path.
it just highlights the ongoing battles within conservatism, maybe, the struggle to define what that even means now.
Definitely shows the tensions. and the complicated history between figures who were once allies and now seem, at least publicly, to be diverging.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, the big takeaway for you listening is probably just how tangled everything is. The contradictions, the history, the motivations.
Yeah, when you read critiques like this, it's really worth thinking about who is saying it, what their own past actions were, and what they might hope to achieve now.
Can someone who helped build a certain political movement really offer a credible way out of it or a different path forward?
That's the question, isn't it?
Mm.
What responsibility does the past hold over these present-day critiques?
Hmm.
Something for you to chew on.
Definitely something to think about. Okay, that's our time for this deep dive. Hope it gave you some useful perspective.
Yeah, I hope so.
Make sure you don't miss the next one. Keep listening to the deep dive. Go ahead and like, subscribe, hit that notification bell.
It helps us keep doing this.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.